Horror Kiwi contains spoilers and may include discussion or mention of potentially disturbing subjects. But don't let that deter you. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started, shall we? After you.
Hello and welcome to Horror Kiwi, Game Kiwi's annual horror podcast. This is our first episode, and today I have a special guest, good friend of the channel, Mary Kish. How you doing, Mary?
Hi, thanks for having me again. I always like coming on.
It's always fun to have you. Today we're going to talk about Higurashi no Naku Koro. I can't say this very good.
Higurashi. Just say Higurashi.
Higurashi, the first season, not Higurashi Kai, because I didn't plan on watching that, so I didn't. I've seen it a bunch of times. This is one of my favorite shows, but I haven't watched it recently, so my detail memory would be a bit off. So I thought I would go into a little bit of the history of this before we start talking about it properly.
Yeah, I think that's great for you to do, because this was my first time ever watching this, and for an outsider going in, I feel like I was super unprepared for what I was watching.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I didn't look at anything, so I didn't look at any summaries, I didn't look at any cheats, and I just watched it. I had no idea that it like reset time and stuff, so it was it was like a huge whirlwind for me. So I think anyone who's new to it, or even people who've seen a season or two, or even fans, would probably benefit from more of an understanding of the history of this series.
Yeah, if you're not prepared, it kind of hits you over the head, and this is
It sure did.
This is one of my favorite shows to watch with other people, just to look at their reactions. I watched this in a rabbit with a friend when I was refreshing for this, and just the chat with him the whole time was very entertaining for me.
Now, because you've seen this multiple times, would you recommend this? Is this something that you think is like,
oh yeah,
definitely worth checking out for people who? What about people who like don't even watch a lot of anime?
If they like kind of mystery, because I'd call this a mystery. At least the first season is.
Yeah, it's got mystery elements to it. Like, for anyone who like doesn't know this and is kind of like going into it blind like I did, it's kind of like a weird whodunit murder mystery type thing, but every couple episodes it resets and then it just starts from scratch. And maybe some pieces you can keep or like learn or carry over, but most of the time everything starts anew, and it's just like the same. How many characters is this? It's like
let's see, there's K1, there's Shion, there's Mion, Rika, Satoko, and then all the secondary characters.
Yeah, Neo. There's probably about 7 characters, and they all reset, and so you're kind of figuring out who's going to die and who's probably killing them, or at least who's evil every time. But it always revolves around the Cotton Drifting Festival. In this small town. So it's cool in the sense of like, especially around this Halloween time, for anyone who's like interested in watching something spooky. I would say you could definitely get away with watching the first 4 episodes and get a huge feel for it. And then if it's not for you, it's not a huge time suck, right? Because then it resets after that anyway.
Yeah,
so
those first 4 episodes are super striking.
Yeah, it's not a huge investment. You could try it before you buy it by all means. And I would say like it's not for everyone is definitely, no, I would say it's too much, but I got burnout.
Yeah, if you haven't watched it, if you're thinking about it, I would just go in with the consideration that there is a lot of violence and blood. There's child abuse for the second half of the first season. So if that is not your thing, just consider that.
Totally. I also think like, and we'll get into this more later, but you know, sometimes it's a bit all over the place. So you kind of have to give it a lot of flexibility. And if you watch it, the translations aren't always perfect. So sometimes it takes liberties with what people are saying, and it can be hard as a English speaker native for me to always understand what was going on, but you know, you pick it up and you figure it out, so it's like not that bad.
How did you
but yeah,
how did you watch it? Did you watch the subs on High Dive, or you watch the dub, or what?
Yeah, I watch subtitle.
Okay.
I almost never watch dubs unless somebody tells me to.
The dub for this is extremely bad.
Okay, good. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, I watched my DVDs of this, so I'm not sure if High Dive has those subs or if they have their own. I don't know.
I didn't see the option. I only watched the subtitle versions, and they're pretty good. And I'm glad that you said that, because I thought, at least if nothing else, the acting is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the voices of the characters are easy to listen to. I mean, they're super young and, you know, super young girls, but it's not too hard to listen to. Everything felt good in that regard. So I'm glad that I chose subtitle version then.
Yeah, the one voice that got me that I only just realized this time is that Inspector Uishi he has the same voice as the police inspector from Detective Conan, which I watched a lot of at the beginning of the year. So I'm like, wait, why does that voice sound familiar? That's not the right cop voice.
You out. Yeah. The cop is such an interesting character. And again, we'll probably get into this more, but he's like, every character is so confusing in this show because sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. So maybe like in the first 4 episodes, you learn to like hate a character like Neon or something. And then you're like totally fine with her the next 4 episodes. So it's really hard to get connected to anyone because you don't know what they're going to be in this episode. So it's definitely a whirlwind, if nothing else.
Yeah. Let's get into history, and feel free to jump in if you have questions or if I'm being dumb or something.
That sounds good.
So, Rikishi 07, or you can also read it Rikishi Reina, because in Japanese 0 is Rei and 7 is Nana. He was born on September 19th, 1973, and I couldn't find if he's released his real name anywhere, so I didn't put it. So I'm just going to keep calling him Rikishi. But he was always interested in video games and art and manga, so much that he went to an art school, like a vocational school. If you've ever been to Japan, you've probably seen ads for a lot of these open enrollment art schools, like on the train or on the TV. Especially during the summer, they'll have ads saying, hey, come enroll for the fall semester or whatever. But he went to one of these, and while he was there, he wrote some self-published works, or doujinshi in Japanese. And he wrote manga and novels, and when he was doing this, he realized that he is not an artist, and if you've looked at the original art for Higurashi, or Umineko, or any of his stuff, you will realize this pretty clearly. Have you seen his original art, Mary?
No, I have not.
Higurashi art. Let me link that to you.
Sure. Ooh, yeah, this is definitely really in line with the show.
Yeah, so, I mean, the show's art's not great. But, yeah, Ryukishi's, he's not an artist. I will say that as you read through the sound novels, you do grow really attached to the really bad art. Because it has character to it, I think. But
yeah, I totally agree, and I think it opens it up for, like, because it looks so cute and kind of kitschy that when like dark stuff happens, it's shocking.
Yeah.
I think that's a part of maybe its appeal, and you see a lot of fan art. I don't know if you notice that, like, if you like look at Higurashi like fan art, people go crazy for it, and I think it's just because these characters are so adorable and so whimsical and so kind of. Just it has a young art style. It's not just that the characters are young, but even like the style in which they're drawn is so young. So when they get all bug-eyed and kind of look crazy in the camera, it's very daunting.
Yeah. I mean, I've been so exposed to his art that I honestly prefer it to more professional versions of it. Like for his games, you'll see that they have like replaced with the PS2 sprites, and I don't like them. They're just devoid of character, in my opinion. But while he was in art school, he wrote what he considers to be a prototype for Higurashi. It's a 60-minute play called The Hinamizawa Bus Stop, and I haven't been able to find exactly what it was, and he says that it's not, like, in the canon, but it's just what he jumped off of to make Higurashi. But then after art school, he tried to get a job in game development, but couldn't manage to do that. So he became a civil servant. But then on August 10th, 2002, at Summer Comiket 62, he released the first arc of Higurashi, which was Onikakshi, the Demoned Away arc. And he released it in the Dojin Circle 07th expansion, which consists of him, his younger brother Yadazakura, and one of his best friends, who's unfortunately no longer with us, BT. And he released the game arc by arc from 2002-2006 at every Comiket except for 65, which I'm not sure why he missed, but he missed it. But yeah, it came out. And it's a big hit. So in 2007, Studio Dean picked it up for a 24-episode anime series, and then another one after that. And that's what we got. So Higurashi is divided into 4 and 4. You have the first 4 arcs, Onikakshi, Cotton Drifting, the Curse Killing, and the Time Wasting chapters are all the question arcs, where it basically sets up all the questions, the what the fuck is going on, for the last 4 arcs, of which we got 2 in the first season. The eye-opening arc and the atonement arc, to answer everything. And those are it's called the question arcs and the answer arcs, respectively.
Let me ask you something as someone who's watched this several times and finished it. Does it all kind of come full circle, or all these like kind of their own piece and they're not really meant to connect?
It comes full circle. It's clearly different loops, and they go over why some things don't match up between arcs. But I can only think of 1, maybe 2 plot threads that aren't completely explained.
Well, that's pretty good. It kind of makes it more interesting for me, considering like the first time I got through an arc and then everything reset, I was quite thrown for a loop, and I thought, well, I guess nothing matters. Like, I don't have to watch, like, I could start at the beginning of any of these loops and get back into it. But knowing that there is a connection through them makes you want to see them through and pay attention, because there might be something that's referenced in a different loop later on that had value.
Yeah, because like at the end of the first season, they kind of make it clear that these are different timelines, with Keiichi remembering stuff that hasn't happened. And then they make it more clear that it's all connected later in the second season. And I don't think that... I hope that's not too much of a spoiler for the second season. But, yeah.
Cool.
So what did you think of this first season?
Overall, I found it appealing on many levels, especially something for someone like myself who's looking for something scary in the October month, but not just then, you know, like sometimes I just like want to watch something that I know is a bit creepy or a bit scary, and that does tick the boxes for me. It's definitely got some great stories that drive me and were really interesting. I think there were times where it fell flat. Like there's a reason that I kind of fell off and didn't have as much dedication to it as I wanted. And sometimes it's just because sometimes it felt like it was just a bit too convenient. It was always that at the end of the arc, you'd find out who it was, but sometimes it didn't feel as earned as I would have liked, or that they had connected the dots enough for me where I felt like I could have predicted who it was. That being said, though, it still is so creepy that it's fun, just in the sense of like kind of mindless, creepy, who's going to die next type entertainment. Like it's the perfect show to kind of just have a beer and watch with like a friend late night to kind of get spooked out. Like it does those things very well. And I think there's specific arcs that I just absolutely loved that I'd love to talk about, or at least like get your thoughts on as well, if that's cool.
Yeah, go for it.
There was an arc where the main boy character, Kichi, was like, this was kind of the one with the abuse.
The curse killing one?
Yeah, and he just didn't like, it was like an uncle who was kind of like mistreating the daughter, who's one of the people from his game group.
Yeah.
So he wanted to kill her. And I absolutely loved the plot of him killing the guy, but then digging it up and the guy not being there. Like, that's good stuff to me. Like, it was really like edge of your seat. Like, what's going to happen next? Is the guy going to come back from the dead, or is he crazy, or like what's going on? The police were really good in that one, where you didn't know what their motivations were, if they were going to let him get away with it, or if they were mad at him, or like we're going to put him into jail. I mean, the whole thing was like, I think from beginning to end, like that was a pretty cool story. I think that was my favorite of all of them.
Yeah, and the way that ties into its answer arc, I really like too.
What's your favorite?
Oh, I think it's the first answer arc where you really get into the Mion-Shion dynamic, and you find out that at birth, Mion and Shion were switched, and you just get the whole story for, what was that, the second arc, where Shion is going crazy?
Yeah, they never bring up that they're twins until the second arc, because in the first arc,
we don't even see Shion.
I remember, yeah, you only see one of them, and I was like super confused that in the very first episode of the second arc, there's now an identical twin. And I thought, like, that's a pretty interesting twist, because now there's a new character and there's all this new stuff to, like, be aware of. But it was a good twist to me to, like, add an additional character like that. Although very Young and the Restless of them to have, like, an identical twin type character.
Yeah, and that's kind of how his sound novels work. Because it's about 6 months in between them, from Summer Comiket to Winter Comiket. So the very beginning, it'll have like a game-changing twist that kind of throws you out of being comfortable thinking you know what's going on, even just at the beginning.
Yeah.
I really like the dynamic of the answer arcs just recontextualizing the stuff we've already seen, like, in a big way.
Yeah, I think they're constantly pushing the viewer out of their comfort zone in every way that they can. It can be exhausting on the other hand of that. Like, sometimes I felt like I couldn't ever get connected to a character, right? Because you never know what they are, and they're always very secretive, and it gets refreshed anyway. So in that regard, I got burnt out, because I was like, I'm not connected to anyone, and I don't care about anyone. Like, I had a really hard time rooting for a character when I didn't know if any of them were like actual good. And I would argue that there really isn't any true good characters. Everybody's got severe problems here.
Oh yeah.
So because of that, it can be hard to connect with the characters. Like, you're kind of just observing people live and die. In that sense, you kind of just regale yourself to watching like a Friday the 13th type movie where they're all probably going to die, and that's fine because they all probably deserve it. So you just wash your hands of it and observe it.
Yeah, and I think that's another part of why the answer arcs are good, because it really fleshes out everybody's motivations in the question arcs. So I feel you don't get a lot of the character depth until the second half of the series as a whole, including the second season stuff.
Mm.
But yeah, that first answer arc has also just a lot of my favorite kind of gore moments, and also just whenever Shion's doing fucking crazy shit, her faces are animated super well.
Yeah, Shion is without a doubt one of the scariest characters. They all kind of have their own different way where they creep people out. Like the little girl, sorry, sometimes
Rika.
their names are like confusing, but yeah, they're scary in a way where they're just saying things. They're just saying things that are scary, but they're not changing their tone too much. They're kind of sedate, and they'll say things like, everyone's going to die, or I'm going to die, and and you need to get out of here, you're in trouble, type thing.
Yeah, Rika does that.
Yeah. But Shion specifically is animated in such a way that is meant to scare the shit out of you. And she has these complete 180s where maybe she's smiling and she's talking to you and she's there's like, I'm trying to think of which curve they are because there's so many of them, but I think there's one where she's just like on a roof or something, and for whatever reason she just starts shaking the ladder and freaking out, and it's really intense to watch.
Yeah, that I forget why she was doing it, but that was when they were looking for Satoko, I think.
Yeah, and she's just like having like it's Mion who's, and she's just shaking the ladder on purpose to like freak everyone out, and it's damn scary to watch. And I think that's probably one of the first times I've seen her face contort like that, which is a part of the animation of this series that's hard to forget. They give her all these characters have huge pupils. That's like a thing that they do.
Yeah.
And when they get angry, their pupils get really small, and they add these huge thick eyebrows to the girls to make them just look so evil. It's just like wild to look at, and I think it's daunting. Like that's like one of the things that, I don't know, like if you watch it, like you mentally you kind of are taken for a bit of a spin because it's really intense.
Yeah, and that arc also has the fingernail pulling. It has Rika putting the knife on her wall and just shoving her neck into it. There's lots of really visceral stuff in that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of what would you just call that? But they're like torturing people in slow, aggressive ways, and typically laughing when they do it, which is super intense. But there's a torture scene, I think, in the second arc that's pretty hard to ignore. The one where they're like
nails.
Putting nails.
Yeah,
the nails in the joints.
Yeah, a lot of this show is hard to watch.
I mean, sometimes people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't think that's why I didn't get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not hard to watch, I guess, but it's not pleasant to watch.
Yeah. Some people have a built-up tolerance to things like that. Like I personally, like, I grew up on Friday the 13th. Like, I love watching teens get massacred. It's a bit weird to say that, but I enjoy it. It's really fun for me to watch horror movies. I flinch and I get scared a lot, but I like it. Like, it's fine. And it's not what shies me away from things. So these teens are, like, they're not even teens. These, like, young kids getting kind of brutalized isn't what turned me away. Not that I was turned away. It's just that I kind of fell off a little bit because I was waiting for me to get connected, and I had a hard time getting the connection to them. But you do have to have a pretty solid stomach for it, because there's that one. Those are the ones that we were talking about, but there's also like this one where like there's a girl who's basically getting her like intestines eaten by birds and stuff. Like those visuals, you don't want to have those if you can't handle something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I will say you do get those connections pretty quickly after the new character, who is a big spoiler, shows up in season 2.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's exciting, like as a first viewer, to experience this and talk about it with you, because I know so little about it that I kind of just observed it as like kind of a teen horror where people were killing each other.
Mm-hmm. And then if you read the sound novels, it goes into a lot more there too, and those are on Manga Gamer and I think Steam. Let me check if they're on Steam. 90% sure they're on Steam. Yeah, the first 5 chapters are on Steam.
Would you consider this show scary? Like, did you ever feel scared when you watched it? Or would you say this is more of like just a creepy and a bit brutal show?
Yeah, that's probably closer. I feel like I'm kind of with you. I didn't necessarily grow up watching this stuff, but I've consumed just so much horror that I don't really flinch too much at the violence. Yeah, just creepy and brutal. There's not really any, like, jump scares or anything besides a really, really oppressive atmosphere. Because it makes it pretty... How do I want to say this? So in the show, the town is pretty not welcoming to outsiders, and they make that clear enough and vivid enough that you, as an outsider to the town, by virtue of being a viewer wherever you are, also feel unwelcome seeing the things that are happening.
Yeah, I think when I was watching this, I never got jump scared. So if anyone was like curious about jump scares or things like that never happened. I don't think I like would have trouble sleeping over it. It's just like pretty aggressive visuals and then creepy overall stories. You're talking about like pretty young kids dying quite often. So it's got this like nice creepy vibe to it, but I wouldn't necessarily call it scary.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever scared watching it.
Like, in college, when this was pretty new, this is only a few years old by then, I would have just people come over and we'd sit and binge through the whole first season. And people would get uncomfortable because of all the stuff we've talked about. They'd never, I don't think, get scared, per se.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think it would be more fun to watch with a group, maybe, because then you guys could probably link the pieces faster as a unit. Like, sometimes I'd be like, oh, she's referencing something from a first arc, right? Like about there's like this statue or whatever, and if you go in there, like, that's definitely really bad, and then it's definitely referenced in a later arc where people went in there and then died. And so that would have been a cool thing if I didn't catch, for someone to remind me. And I bet you there's all sorts of connections that I missed. Just little things that are similar from arc to arc that I didn't observe. And so I think seeing it with friends would have made it a lot easier for people to point out all the connections between them. Yeah,
this is a great show to watch party. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about, that you were wondering about?
Well, I guess now, like, I feel like it could always be answered later on. I was curious about, the littlest girl, with blue hair, Rika, and like maybe more of her connection to everything, because she kind of has this, otherworldly perception about everything. She's the one who has like the premonitions and says things like, everyone's going to die and I'm going to die, and she knows all of it in advance. So she seems like she's definitely more involved than like the boy or like a lot of these girls. Like, she's not, she doesn't just seem like a character. She seems like she's an integral part of the story.
Yeah, it kind of revolves around Rika. And that's a big part of season 2. I'm wondering if I shouldn't said we should talk about season 2 too, but I thought 50 episodes would be a lot.
It is a lot, especially right before TwitchCon. I was like burning through them, but they're not that long and you can get through them, you know? So like, I definitely enjoyed watching them all. I think I said this at the beginning, but I would say it again. It's like, if people haven't seen it and they're curious about it, it's worth probably 6 episodes to get through the first arc. And then from that, you can kind of determine if it's your style. I definitely started to get burnt out by like the 4th arc because I didn't know if there would ever be a payoff.
And there's a little bit of payoff in season 1, but I guess I just always forget just how much the show just stops at the first season. It doesn't really give you any sort of closure. It says, hey, wait for season 2.
Yeah, I fully agree. But yeah, that's pretty much like the main things that I would take away from watching this first season. Definitely enjoyable, but not for everyone. It takes patience and an open mind and a tough stomach.
Yeah. So we do have a question someone sent in. Jordan S. asks, so why does Mion have a gun in like 50% of her shots? Sometimes in the same scene it'll be there 1 second, then not there. No one seems to see the gun. The gun has never been used? What's with the gun? I'm pretty sure they don't talk about that in the anime ever. I think they talk about it in like one of the bonus arcs that he released some comic at. I think it's just an airsoft gun, and it doesn't get used ever in any of the main arcs. It's just
It's
part
such
of
an
her visual
interesting
design.
character. Yeah, like a character thing to have like a gun sometimes and not others.
Yeah, it's really weird for 1980s Japan in the middle of nowhere, basically.
Yeah. Do you think it's something that could be as simple as because it's an old anime, like an old animation, and like as you guys can see from watching it, like it's not like it's great animation, right? Like it's not really well done, that it's a simple error where they're like it costs too much to draw it in every scene, so they just stop putting it in.
I'm not sure, because like I said, it never gets used in the anime. But it could be like 2000 Studio Dean was notoriously bad. Like, if you watch this series, if you pay attention, like, arms and legs get super noodly, like, a lot. Like, it might be the second season. There's a point where somebody's sitting on a bed and her legs just look like single lines without any detail at all to them. So
right, it's like they just kind of gave up on it.
Yeah, so Studio Dean has questionable... Now I think they're better, but in the 2000s and late 90s, they were very questionable. But I don't know how much more I have to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of is what it is for me. Like I observed it. I'm trying to think of like other like wonderful moments or times where I was like, this is sweet, or like times where it really fell off the map for me. I loved kind of the one that did have the girl with the nails in her joints and stuff, and she was getting that one was like a good twist for me, where I didn't know exactly what was going to happen until the very end, and I felt really rewarded by that. It has a pretty weird ending, but like I still liked the whole storyboard of that one. So like that one was a really good one for me, and I really liked the guy when he was killing the uncle because of the abuse to the little girl. That was my favorite, and the reason it's the strongest to me is because he's an interesting character. He seems like a good dude. He's trying to do the right thing, but he's killing someone. So it's like this anti-hero issue where it's like, do you support someone who kills a guy because that guy is abusive? Yes, no. Like, that's interesting. Like, that's a really interesting plot for me. And then when it just gets into the weirdness of the fact that he kills him, or he thinks he does, and then when he digs it up and the dude's not there, like that's a fascinating story. Like that's an exciting story, and like I couldn't wait to like watch the next one. Like to me that was a really good one. There were other ones that just didn't grab me like that. Like I wasn't as emotionally driven to like continue and find out what happens next, but like that one was damn good.
Yeah. And then the reason that he didn't find him is because he is remembering stuff that happens in that answer arc, the way they go about taking him out then, and just not realizing it.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the character of the cop, or like I guess he's like a detective or whatever he is, because he's a really interesting, where like sometimes he's always really aloof, and he's always like trying to make every character uncomfortable. So even if he's doing the right thing because he's a cop and he's trying to figure it out, I never liked him.
Yeah,
like, he's not a very likable character.
No, he's not likable, and like I feel like a lot of the secondary characters aren't super likable. I guess maybe Dr. Irie's maybe the most likable, just because he seems off, but generally trying to be a good doctor and adult to the kids. But like Takano, it always seems kind of shitty. The photographer whose name I can't remember, Tomitake, is just kind of there to die. We meet Akasaka in that flashback arc, and he's pretty cool, but we only get him in that flashback arc. And then Satoko's aunt and uncle are fucking garbage people.
Yeah, they're just the worst. And it's hard to get by them. You want what's coming to some people, but then there's other ones where you're not really sure of anyone and then they're dead. So you're like, well, I don't know if I liked you or not, but you're dead now, so there's really nothing else we can do here.
Yeah.
It's hard to get it connected to anyone. They either die or they're evil or they're just creepy as hell. There's truly no great character that you're gonna root for, I would say, in this.
Yeah, I feel like this is maybe hard to adapt to a TV series just because most of this first season is going to be set up for the back half of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, because like his second series, with Umineko no Naku Koro ni, they adapted all of the question arcs for that into anime, and they just didn't with the answer arcs. Partially because the anime season for that was a very, very bad adaptation. But it was just all set up stuff. So it's hard to get, again, it's hard to get connected to stuff, to people, and to have a handle on what was going on. The ending was just, it's kind of non-conclusive because there's still a whole other half to it.
Yeah.
And also that story has stuff that is pretty... You need to be in that medium of visual novel to do that stuff, and trying to adapt it is not something that you can really do effectively. And they did not effectively do it.
Yeah, it's definitely not perfect. And
Yeah.
I would stress that to new viewers, is that you're going into something that you're 100% going to find flaws with. But if you are more relaxed about those types of things, this is something you could really enjoy. I've looked at a lot of reviews after the fact, and I saw that it's quite divided. Some people really like it, and some people think it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So it's clearly a divisive show that some people just find too aloof or too difficult to grasp for it to be valuable. And I think that's valid.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder if I would like this as much if I had to wait for all of it instead of having both seasons available to me immediately. And I probably binged through them, knowing me, in college. But yeah, I latched on to the series very, very hard. Like I said, I had those watch parties. When I went to my first AX, it was when this was still pretty new, and I bought a lot more merchandise for this than I should have, probably. So yeah, this is a series I'm very, very fond of.
I think that's cool. I think other people could get connected to it too, and I'm sure people who listen to this will be people who are very fond of this series, and I can see that as well, which is why I was able to go as far as I did with the time I had to watch these. A part of my judgment was these are hard to connect to, and there's no one that I'm supporting, but I still watch it because it's entertaining and it's fun, and these characters are interesting, and some of the stories are just really, really entertaining. So it's definitely got that for it as well.
Yeah, and if there's anyone who shares Mary's thoughts that I can't connect to things and doesn't feel like there's payoff, but you think that you're still with it, I urge you to see it through, because everything does. All your questions will get answered pretty much. It tries to get you connected to the characters. Whether or not it succeeds is a personal thing. But yeah, it gets there, I think.
Cool. That kind of motivates me to keep on trucking.
Yeah, season 2 is really good. It takes a turn. It gets a little bit less horror-y, because it's explaining what everything is. But yeah, it's good. But I think we have just about talked about everything there is to talk about, right? At least for us.
Yeah, probably just for this one. Yeah, I covered the characters that I was interested in and my favorite moments, and then maybe where I felt like it could improve. But overall, I wouldn't deter someone from watching it, just with heavy bearings that it's not perfect. It's got a lot of problems, but I do think it's worth trying. And like I said, it's super easy to try.
Yeah. It is available for free legally on High Dive, even though they have really shitty ad structure. There are DVDs of it, but they're very, very old and hard to get a hold of. So I don't think there's any easily attainable way to get physical media for it. It's only high dive for a legal method. But they have the second season, which I didn't expect, because that second season did not get DVDs at all. It is only digital. But yeah, check it out if you're so inclined. Or hopefully you haven't been listening to this if you haven't watched it yet, because we just spoiled the entire first season for you.
I think you'd still be surprised, but yeah, we gave away a good amount.
Yeah. So, in a couple weeks, I'll be recording the second and final Horror Kiwi podcast for 2017 with Rudy, who has been on stuff for the last 2 years. The topic, theme, whatever, will be Freddy versus Jason versus Sadako versus Kayako. So we'll be watching those two movies and talking about how the US and Japan kind of handled their, I guess, monster battle movies differently. We will be recording that in a couple weeks, and that will be up on this feed as well as the Game Kiwi YouTube, and will also be on the feed of the show Random Podcast Generator on the Gumby Cat Network. This should all come out on the same day or so. But if you are interested in that and you want to watch those two movies and kind of join the discussion with us, go ahead and send any facts or stories or questions or corrections about this episode to majidepodcast@gmail.com, MAJIDE podcast@gmail.com. But yeah, if you are here because of Mary, then I'm Mike, and I run a YouTube channel called Game Kiwi, which you can find at gamekiwi.net. There's a lot of archives of streams I do, like right now I'm playing Ace Combat 5, La Mulana, and XCOM, and for this month of October I will be streaming Alan Wake and a bunch of other spooky games later in the evenings. So check those. I can't talk. I have another podcast to record after this. Check out those things. And yeah, Mary, do you have anything you want to tell people about?
Just to be aware that I am starting my own Twitch streams. So I'm no longer with Misclicks, and I'm starting my own channel on just Twitch/Mary Kish, MERRYKISH.
Okay,
And there I'm going to be playing variety games and having lots of fun, and I'm making assets, and I love it, and it's going to be really fun. It's just taking some time to get together because TwitchCon is right around the corner.
Yeah.
So anyone who knows what I'm doing now, professionally, I'm doing a lot of Twitch's streams, and it's a great joy, but it takes a lot of time, including my personal time, so I just have not had the time, but I am working on it, chipping away at assets for our a huge series of new live streams, not just me, but also with friends, and I'm really excited about it. So more info on that soon.
Cool. I'll also give you those button clicks and check out your stuff.
Yeah, please follow along.
This is news to me, too. So big thanks to my co-host of Majide, John, for letting me put these episodes in the Majide podcast feed. And thanks to the Gumby Cat Network for having Majide and Roundabout This as a guest thing. So be sure to check out all of the stuff on the Gumby Cat Network, which is at GumbyCatNetwork.com? GumbyCatNetworks.com with an S. So check all that stuff out. There's some good shit there. Even including there's my stuff there too. But yeah, thank you a lot, Mary, for joining us. I know you're very busy right now, and kind of busy all the time. Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun to do, and thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for getting me hooked on a new show that I would not have watched if it wasn't for this podcast. So,
yeah. I always try and find things you'll like before I ask you to be on them. But yeah, thanks again, and thanks everybody for listening. And yeah, this has been Mike with Horror Kiwi. Keep it spooky, everyone.
Ooh.